There are a lot, and I mean a lot of polls out there of varying different sample sizes, of various different sort of regional demographics and where they got these people. And they're all pretty much in agreement about one thing, and that is that the Tories are on course to lose the next general election. The big thing and the big disagreement seems to be amongst the pollers seems to be the scale of Tory defeat. And that is what you are seeing a lot of. Like this disagreement between the polls about just how big that defeat is going to be. But we should also bear in mind that a lot of these polls, in fact, I do not think there is one that takes tactical voting into account, but we are seeing a lot of these polls not take tactical voting into account, not thinking that that is going to be the big message. You know, if you really want to deliver the Tories a pretty big sizable chunk of a defeat, then vote tactically. And that is what we are not seeing in a lot of these polls. This, this building in of well, what if tactical voting happens here and this type of thing. So there is a lot of these polls that are predicting some very very sizable defeats, still not bringing in tactical voting. We've talked about the one that would somehow said that there would only be like 4 Tory MPs left. Now, I do not think it's going to be that sizable a defeat, but come election night, I think we are going to see it play out like this. I think we're going to see a Tory loss, and then I think we are going to see how big, like just how big that Tory loss, like generally is. That I think is how general election night's going to go. And I've said before, I think when you look at the polls, even some of these more very dramatic polls that give like the Tories like 40 or so MPs and things like that go on, I think you are going to get in the range. And I think this is again, not that I wouldn't want a bigger defeat for them, but I think it's going to be about 120 to 80. That is my sort of rough area of prediction. Now, if it is even bigger than that, if they lose even more than that, excellent, great. But like I say, I think trying to sort of build expectations for myself, and I think the election night will be about, oh well, the Tories lost, but oh, how much did they lose by? That I think is going to be the story of the election. And just yesterday, you saw Carol Vorderman laughing about the number of big prominent Tories going to lose their seats. So we are going to see more of the quote Portillo moments. All these suspected people who, if there was another leadership election, would absolutely be throwing their hat into the ring. Most of them are gone. All the big players from Penny Mordaunt, James Cleverly, Tom Tugendhat, a lot of these are just going. And yet those would be the people who would absolutely, as we said, be vying for that leadership. And the only one who survives, which unfortunately I think sets a very interesting direction, I think, for the Tory party, was be that Kimi Badenoch somehow survived this. And then who knows which, shall we say, other Tory might suddenly get the pangs of maybe wanting to seize ambition beyond their means and sort of throws their hat into the ring to try and defeat Kimi Badenoch. Could be interesting. Could be very, very interesting indeed in this. But one interesting thing that's come up recently is now Rishi Sunak's seat. His seat that he has is actually at risk. According to a new poll, he is now at risk. So there is currently, at the moment, according to this poll, just 2.4%. This has now become a hyper marginal seat, meaning that Rishi Sunak could be the first. I think this would make him like the first ever prime minister to lose his seat in an election, like the first ever. So that would also be a incredible blow to the Tories as well if that would happen as well. Like their own leader of the party loses their seat. That honestly would be cherry on the icing cherry on the cake. What a story that would be. Just like Rishi Sunak losing his seat that night in itself would be like the dominant story running for like the next morning after that election. Regardless of the scale of the loss, just that alone would be a massive news story. Also, Jeremy Hunt, the Lib Dem candidate, is about 1% behind him, trailing in the polls. So yet another big senior Tory who could lose their seat. and yet, there is something of or at least a hoped bizarre comeback being put forward by some of these Tories in response to some of these polls. It's really weird they're saying this, but we saw this when we covered Will Atkinson. But if you saw the New Yorker did a really good long read piece about what 14 years of Tory rule had sort of done to Britain, sort of goes from the initial stages and just goes through everything, all the past 14 years. It's an amazing article. Go check it out. But the last thing they do is the journalist goes and interviews this very sort of senior Tory, and he puts forward this idea that we have heard before, that a lot of these Tories are somehow thinking that they will lose this election and then somehow there will be this glorious renaissance of Toryism, and that it will just they'll come back with a vengeance at the next election and defeat Labour. Now, first of all, that is incredibly optimistic view, because even if you have, let's say we do go into another 5 years of that, there is no way in hell that Labour is going to be as bad as the current Tory party. They've got a big mess to fix out. It's going to take them at least 3 to 4 years really to sort out a lot of this mess. They've got to sort of really sort it out. And of course, during that time, they're going to have to make decisions, and I think go out and actually seek new ways to really look at how to tackle some of these problems. And because we are going to be electing people who, compared to the Tories, are not as like ideologically focused, this now means that there will be an acceptance and willingness to look at new ideas and policies that will have good, outcomes for the rest of the UK. That is what I would hope. And of course, the whole idea of this sort of this new Tory cope is that that's not going to happen, and that somehow they're going to reap the benefits of this. Well, I would always say to this, why are you going to reap the benefits? Because what new Toryism, what new ideas, what new policies is this party going to sort of pull together in what is going to be an incredibly fractious civil war type time? Because oh boy, once they land in opposition, the gloves are going to go off and they are going to just go after each other like hell for leather. And this is why I've talked about this before. The bigger defeat, the longer they stay out of power, because they haven't got any new good idea thought leaders coming through. They've got no one who is generally trying to put forward going, hey, Rishi Sunak, if you pay attention to me and you did this, you might get, maybe claw back, something in the polls. You might be able to get, the conservative voters back on side again if you did this. There's no one around saying that, because they are all targeted, eyes on blinkers to this free market fundamentalism that we've talked about before. That is what they should be following. That is the route and direction that they should be going. Because if anything sort of deviates from that, well, it's not the ideas, it's not the it's not the free market fundamentalism wrong. It's clearly something else that's wrong. It must be that woke blob, or maybe it's just the economy not being that. Honestly, we are going to see a lot of excuses come out for the Tories, and you are going to see a lot of Tories obviously go, "Oh well, never mind. We'll win the next general election." Based on what? um, but there you go. So yeah, it's kind of bizarre. Obviously, when you see these polls be excellent, great, that's going to make some Tory MPs, and of course those at CCHQ, panic very, very much. But don't believe fully into the hype. Don't get too excited. I think there is going to be a very significant Tory defeat when we do come to general election night. But again, it's the scale of that particular general election defeat that it is going to be. But certainly, potentially, with the incredible caveat that Rishi Sunak could be the first prime minister to lose his seat, if not the first prime minister ever, probably maybe even the first modern prime minister to lose their seat. But yeah, it just goes to show you just how bad things really are that they've gotten into that sort of situation. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.